Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation. I'm excited to have you here. Today, we'll be exploring Mega Goal 3.1, focusing on Unit 4, the world of TV. We'll look into its form, meaning, and function. Over the next few slides, we'll dive into how television shapes our world and what makes it a powerful medium. So, let's get started and enjoy the journey through the fascinating world of TV. Now, let's focus on distinguishing between irregular comparative and superlative adjectives. This is important because, unlike regular adjectives, these don't follow the usual or est endings. Instead, they change completely, like good becoming better and best, or bad turning into worse and worst. Recognizing these irregular forms helps us speak more naturally and accurately. Remember, mastering these will make your comparisons much clearer and more fluent as you practice. So, looking at this slide, we see a series of statements comparing different film genres and styles. It might seem a bit subjective, but it gives us insight into preferences and perceptions about storytelling. First, it says that horrors are considered the best. That suggests many people find horror films engaging and impactful. Then, it points out that epics are more boring, implying that while grand stories are impressive, they might lack the immediate excitement seen in other genres. Next, adventures are described as being as good as actions, which highlights how adventure films often blend excitement with storytelling, making them equally compelling. It also states that westerns are the least interesting, possibly reflecting changing tastes or cultural shifts in film preferences. The slide then emphasizes that actions are better, reinforcing the idea that dynamic, fast-paced scenes tend to appeal more to audiences. And finally, it claims that science fiction is the greatest, perhaps because of its imaginative possibilities and ability to explore complex themes. In the picture, we see two men discussing their favorite genres. What they're saying or how they view these genres ties back to these points, highlighting personal preferences and how different genres appeal to different audiences. It's a reminder that our tastes can be quite subjective, yet they also reflect broader trends and cultural values in storytelling. Let's take a closer look at how we compare things using adjectives. First, when we want to express that something is the highest or most extreme in a certain quality, we say the best or the greatest. For example, this is the best option or she is the greatest player. Next, if we're comparing two things and one is better than the other, we use better. For instance, this method is better than the previous one. When something is more boring than something else, we say more boring. For example, this lecture is more boring than the last. On the flip side, if something is the least interesting among a group, we say the least interesting. So, that was the least interesting part of the presentation. We also have the phrase as good as, which indicates that two things are equal in quality. For instance, this product is as good as that one. Finally, the greatest emphasizes the topmost position or quality, often in a competitive sense. It's similar to the best, but sometimes used to highlight a superlative achievement or status. These expressions help us communicate comparisons clearly and effectively, which is essential in making our points understood and compelling throughout this presentation. Today, I want to talk about how we compare things using the word more or less. For example, in our first sentence, butterfly is more beautiful than frog. We're showing that the butterfly's beauty surpasses that of the frog. It's a way to highlight the difference between two objects. Similarly, in the second sentence, the ant is smaller than the elephant. We're indicating that the ant's size is less than the elephant's. These examples illustrate what we call comparatives. They are used to compare two objects, showing which one has more or less of a particular quality. Understanding comparatives helps us describe differences clearly and accurately. Remember, whenever you're comparing two things, think about whether you're emphasizing more or less of a quality. That's the key to using comparatives effectively. Today, we're going to explore adjectives, which are a fundamental part of how we describe and add detail to our language. Adjectives come in two main kinds, and understanding these can really enhance our communication skills. The first kind is the descriptive adjectives, which tell us more about a noun's qualities or characteristics. For example, words like beautiful, large, or bright help paint a clearer picture of the object or person we're talking about. The second kind is the limiting adjectives, which specify or limit the noun in some way. Think of words like this, every, or few. These help us narrow down or specify exactly what we're referring to. By understanding these two types of adjectives, we can make our descriptions more precise and impactful. This ties directly into our overall theme of effective communication, because the more accurately we can describe, the better our audience understands us. So, mastering adjectives allows us to add richness and clarity to our language, making every message more engaging and clear. When we compare two things using short adjectives, especially those with one or two syllables, we add "er" to the end of the adjective and then include "then." For example, if we want to say someone is taller than someone else, we say taller than. This rule helps us clearly show the comparison. In the slide, you'll notice words like stronger, taller, tall, and strong. These are all adjectives we can compare using this rule. For instance, the blonde man is stronger than the thin man. Similarly, Sami is taller than Maher. Remember, this pattern works with short adjectives to make comparisons simple and clear. It's a useful rule to keep in mind when describing differences between two people or objects. Let's look at how we compare sizes using the word bigger. For example, Saudi Arabia is bigger than Bahrain. This shows that Saudi Arabia is larger in size. Now, moving to the next concept with the word fatter. When we want to say someone or something has more fat, we use fatter. For example, Salem is fatter than Saud. This means Salem has more fat or is more overweight. A key point to remember is how we form the comparative for some adjectives that end in a vowel followed by a consonant. When an adjective ends in a vowel plus a consonant, like big or fat, we double the consonant before adding "er" to make the comparison. So for big, when we want to say bigger, we double the G and say bigger. The same goes for fat, becoming fatter. This pattern helps us form correct comparatives and makes our descriptions clearer and more precise. It's a simple rule, but very useful for describing differences in size or amount. Remember, understanding these small rules helps us communicate more effectively and accurately when comparing things. Now let's look at how we compare things using the words heavier and heavy. When we want to say that one thing is more weighty than another, we use the word heavier. For example, if I say, "The blue whale is heavier than a shark," I'm comparing their weights and indicating that the whale is the heavier one. It's a simple way to make comparisons in English, especially with adjectives that describe size or weight. Remember, heavier is the comparative form of heavy, which means it's used when we're comparing two or more things. Understanding this will help you describe differences more clearly and accurately in your conversations and writing. Now let's look at how we form the comparative form of adjectives like braver and brave. When an adjective ends with an E, we only need to add "r" to make it the comparative. So in the case of brave, we simply add "r", and it becomes braver. For example, you might say, "Batman is braver than Iron Man." This rule helps us understand how to compare qualities in different people or things. Remember, the key point here is that if the adjective ends with an E, just add "r" to form the comparative. This simple rule keeps our language clear and consistent when we're describing differences in courage or other qualities. Now let's talk about how to compare things that are more expensive. When we want to say that one thing costs more than another, especially when using long adjectives with 3 or more syllables, we use a specific structure. We say more followed by the adjective, and then. For example, if we want to compare gold and silver, we say gold is more expensive than silver. This is a simple yet important rule to remember because it helps us express comparisons clearly and correctly, especially when dealing with longer adjectives. Understanding this structure is key to making accurate comparisons in English. Let's take a closer look at some comparisons. When we say farther than, we're talking about something that is more distant in a physical or metaphorical sense. For example, if one city is farther than another, it's farther away. Then, we have worse than, which means something is of lower quality or less desirable compared to something else. Think of a situation where one outcome is worse than another, highlighting a negative difference. Next, better than is the positive counterpart, indicating an improvement or superior quality. For instance, if one option is better than another, it's a preferable choice. Moving on to the scale, far and bad are on the lower end, far indicating distance and bad indicating poor quality. Conversely, good is on the higher end, showing quality or desirability. Now, the key point here is that, while these comparisons generally follow a pattern, there are a few exceptions. Sometimes, the way we express these comparisons isn't straightforward, and language can get a bit tricky. Overall, understanding these terms helps us communicate differences clearly, whether we're discussing physical distances, qualities, or relative evaluations. And recognizing the exceptions ensures we're precise in our comparisons, which ties back to the broader theme of effective communication and nuanced understanding. When we compare devices, it's helpful to think about what makes one better than another. Here, I want to highlight that the iPhone is better than Samsung in certain aspects. This isn't just about brand preference, it's about specific features and user experience that set the iPhone apart. For example, many users find the iPhone's integration with other Apple products to be seamless. The operating system is known for its stability and security, which enhances overall user confidence. Additionally, the iPhone often leads in software updates and support, ensuring your device stays current longer. Of course, Samsung has its strengths too, but today, we're focusing on why many consider the iPhone to be better in key areas. This comparison helps us understand what to prioritize when choosing a smartphone that best fits our needs. When using a comparative, you must always follow it with the word then. This is a key point because it helps clarify what you're comparing and keeps the sentence grammatically correct. For example, if you say, "This option is better," you need to specify then, what like this option is better than the other one. It's really important to remember this rule so that your comparisons are clear and professional. This ties into the overall theme of effective communication, because being precise with language helps your message come across more confidently. So, anytime you're making a comparison, think about adding, then, afterwards to strengthen your point and avoid confusion. Today, I want to talk about how we use as to make comparisons. So the key idea here is that we use as plus an adjective plus as to compare two things that are equal or similar in some way. For example, if I say Dan is as tall as Sam, it means Dan and Sam are equally tall. The structure is simple. As plus adjective plus as. Remember, this expression highlights equality between two qualities or characteristics. So, when you're comparing things that are similar or the same, this is the pattern to use. Let's keep this in mind as we look at some more examples later. Today, we're going to look at how to use not as to make comparisons. For example, if I say, Sam is not as tall as Tom, it means that Sam's height is less than Tom's. This structure helps us compare two things or people when one is less of a certain quality than the other. Remember, the pattern is not as followed by an adjective, then as, and finally the person or thing being compared. So, it's a simple way to express that something isn't equal or as much as something else. This is especially useful when we want to highlight differences in qualities like height, size, or other adjectives. Using this structure keeps our comparisons clear and grammatically correct, fitting perfectly into our overall theme of making precise comparisons. Today, I want to talk about how we can compare things using the structure, not as. This is a useful way to show that one thing is less of a certain quality than another. For example, we might say, Finding Nemo is not as good as The Lion King. Here, we're highlighting that Finding Nemo, while still a good movie, doesn't quite reach the same level as The Lion King in terms of quality. The key point to remember is that we use not as followed by an adjective, then as again to make the comparison. This helps us express differences in qualities in a clear and simple way. So, whenever you're comparing two things and want to show that one is less of a certain quality than the other, this structure is really handy. It connects to our overall theme of mastering comparisons and improving our descriptive skills in English. The more I explore different comparison methods, the more I realize how powerful the comparative structure can be. When we use the phrase, the more, we're actually highlighting a relationship between two actions or states that change together. For example, the more I learn about this topic, the more I want to dive deeper. This structure helps us emphasize how one action influences or enhances another. It's especially useful in presentations when we want to show progress or a cause and effect relationship. So, as we go through our content, keep in mind how these comparisons can make our points clearer and more engaging for our audience. The Lion King is by far the best TV film of all. When I say by far, I really want to emphasize how much it stands out compared to others. It's not just a good film, it's exceptional in every aspect: storytelling, animation, music. This phrase helps us understand that, in our opinion, there's no competition. It's a clear favorite and an example of how a great production can leave a lasting impression on audiences. This idea ties into our overall theme of excellence in filmmaking and how certain works can set the standard for others. All right, now let's look at some examples of how we compare things using the superlative form. When we're dealing with short adjectives, usually 1 or 2 syllables, we add est at the end to show the highest degree. For example, we say old becomes oldest, meaning it's the most old compared to others. Similarly, short becomes shortest, meaning it has the least height or length among a group. In sentences, we can say she is the oldest, meaning she is the most old person in the group, or Sarah is the shortest, meaning Sarah has the least height among everyone. So remember, with short adjectives, just add est to form the superlative, and it helps us compare things or people to see who or what is at the top or bottom of a certain quality. All right, let's dive into the key points about forming the superlative of adjectives. When we're talking about the biggest, we're actually comparing one thing to all others in a group. Now, a common rule is that for most adjectives, we add est at the end to form the superlative. But there's a special rule for certain adjectives ending in a vowel plus a consonant. For example, if the adjective ends in a vowel followed by a consonant, like big, we double the consonant before adding est. So, big becomes biggest. This doubling helps maintain the correct pronunciation and makes the word sound natural when spoken. Remember, this rule is particularly important to keep in mind because it applies to words like big, hot, fat, and similar adjectives ending with a vowel-consonant combination. Overall, these rules help us form the correct superlative adjectives, making our comparisons clear and grammatically correct. So, whenever you're describing the most extreme in a group, keep these rules in mind to sound confident and accurate. Now let's take a look at how we use funny as an adjective. When we want to say something is the most humorous or amusing, we often add the suffix est. For example, in this case, the clown with the red hat is the funniest of all. Notice how we change the ending from y to I before adding est. This is a common rule for adjectives ending with y, so if you want to describe the most amusing person or thing, just remember to make that small spelling change and then add est. This helps us express superlatives and compare things in a clear, simple way. It's a useful rule to remember when talking about humor or anything that can be measured in degrees of funniness. Now let's look at how we use the superlative form with long adjectives. The key point here is that when we're comparing things using adjectives with 3 or more syllables, we add the word most before the adjective. For example, if we want to say something is the most expensive of all, we say the most expensive. To illustrate, think about the diamond. It's considered the most expensive of all. So whenever you're dealing with longer adjectives, just remember, add most plus the adjective to form the superlative. This helps us clearly show which thing stands out as the highest or the best in a given category. This concept ties into our overall theme of comparative and superlative forms, helping us make more precise and impactful descriptions. Let's take a look at some of the extremes and nuances in our scale. When we talk about the farthest or the worst, we're referring to the absolute ends of the spectrum, things that are most extreme or least desirable. Conversely, the best or good highlight the positive or most favorable points within that range. It's important to recognize that these terms help us understand the full scope of our subject, from the very least desirable to the most outstanding. Now the words far, bad, and good serve as key indicators of quality or distance within this scale. But of course, life and situations are rarely perfect. That's why, in many cases, things don't fit neatly into these extremes. And that's where the idea of exceptions comes in. These few exceptions remind us that not everything conforms to the general pattern. So, in summary, while most things tend to fall somewhere along this spectrum from far to good, we need to be aware that some cases are exceptions, standing apart from the usual trend. Understanding these nuances helps us evaluate situations more accurately and make better decisions. So, when we talk about cold, we're referring to temperatures that are significantly lower than what we experience in warmer seasons. And as the temperature drops, it becomes even colder than before. Now, if we compare winter and autumn, winter is generally much colder. In fact, winter is autumn when it comes to temperature. This contrast helps us understand how seasonal changes impact our environment and daily lives. Recognizing these differences is important because it shapes how we prepare for each season and adapt to the changing weather patterns. A snake is more dangerous than an earthworm. That's a striking comparison, isn't it? When we think about danger in the animal kingdom, snakes often come to mind because of their venom and potential threat to humans. Earthworms, on the other hand, are harmless creatures that play a vital role in soil health. This slide highlights how some animals are significantly more dangerous than others, emphasizing the importance of understanding these differences. Recognizing which animals pose real risks helps us stay safe and appreciate their roles in nature. It's a reminder that danger isn't just about size or appearance, it's about behavior, venom, and how they interact with us. So, in our overall discussion, this comparison underscores the diversity of animal dangers and the need for awareness. Ostriches are the biggest birds in the world. When we talk about size, they truly stand out among all avian species. They can reach heights of up to 9 feet and weigh as much as 340 pounds. That's roughly the size of a small adult human. Their impressive stature is not just for show. It helps them spot predators from a distance and stay safe in their natural habitats. So, as we explore the diversity of bird species, keep in mind that ostriches are a perfect example of how size can be a key survival advantage in the animal kingdom. So, on this slide, I want to highlight some of the key points that tie everything together. First, it's important to understand that the core theme of our presentation is about innovative approaches and how they can transform our strategies. Now, when we look at these points, what really stands out is the emphasis on adaptability and continuous learning. These are crucial because in today's fast-paced environment, being flexible and open to new ideas allows us to stay ahead. Additionally, I want to stress the importance of integrating technology thoughtfully, ensuring it complements our goals rather than just adopting it for the sake of it. Connecting these ideas back to our overall message, it's about creating a mindset that embraces change and leverages it for growth. Ultimately, these concepts are the backbone of sustained success, and understanding them helps us move forward confidently. Let's take a look at the final part of our session today. On the slide, you'll see references to the workbook, specifically page 263, where you'll find an exercise labeled as, "Oh, this is a great opportunity to reinforce what we've discussed." I encourage you to work through this exercise thoughtfully, as it will help solidify your understanding of the key concepts. Now, about the homework, this isn't just busy work. It's designed to give you practical experience and deepen your grasp of the material. Completing this homework will also prepare you better for any upcoming assessments or real-world applications. Remember, the goal here is to connect what we've learned today with your broader understanding. So, take your time, reflect on the questions, and see how these concepts fit into the bigger picture of our overall theme. If you have any questions or need clarification, don't hesitate to reach out. This is all about your learning journey, and I'm here to support you every step of the way. Thanks. I really appreciate you taking the time to go through this presentation with me. I hope the key points we've discussed today have been clear and helpful. Remember, the main takeaway is how these concepts connect to the overall theme of our work and how they can impact your projects moving forward. If you have any questions or want to dive deeper into any of the topics, feel free to reach out. Thanks again for your attention and engagement.